You know what scares people who walk away from faith? The moment they realize God never let go. San Giovanni Rotondo, 1920s. A man walks through those narrow Italian streets. Dr. Francesco Riccardi, respected, intelligent, beloved by the poor he treats for free, and he hates God with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, not the casual atheism of indifference, the militant kind, the kind that writes articles, the kind that stands in cafes and systematically dismantles every argument for the divine. He calls the Capuchin convent the factory of charlatans. He saves his sharpest words for one priest in particular, Padre Pio of Pietrelcina, the friar with bleeding wounds on his hands. The doctors who respect him tell him the truth. No hope, no cure. And as death approaches, something cracks in that brilliant mind. He refuses every priest, except one. Only Padre Pio could confess me, he tells his family, but I have offended him too much. Doesn't trust the crowds. Doesn't trust the stigmata that bleeds every day for 50 years. But Father Raphael, his superior, convinces him. This is God's will. So Padre Pio walks through those same streets, followed by townspeople who sense something. They pray. The dying atheist, the stigmatized priest. September 1920, something. The doctor who spent years mocking this man whispers two words. Forgive me, Padre. Confession happens. Private. Sacred. And as Padre Pio leaves, he says, Goodbye, doctor. I will see you at the Capuchins. Everyone knows what that means. The next morning, Riccardi should be dead. Instead, he's walking. Cancer gone. The doctors confirm it. Impossible. He lives until 1932, not as an atheist, as a militant Catholic, defending the priest he once destroyed in print. This actually happened. San Giovanni Rotondo remembers. Research published December 2024, and C. Bernard Ruffin's The True Story 3rd edition, published 2018, which draws from first-hand interviews and friary records maintained by the Capuchin order. Ruffin, a Lutheran pastor turned Padre Pio scholar, spent decades verifying accounts with living witnesses before they died. Now back to the information. He wasn't even unusual, because Padre Pio had this gift. Not just healing, not just the stigmata that bled a cup of blood daily from 1918 to 1968. He could read souls. The moment you walked into his confessional, he knew what you did, what you refused to confess, what you convinced yourself wasn't sin, and he knew what you believed, or didn't. He writes articles in Italia Laica magazine attacking Padre Pio. Never met the man. Doesn't need to. The whole thing is obviously fraud. Exploiting the ignorant, peasants, and superstition. Until Del Fonte's nephew gets sick. Enrico, kidney disease, tuberculosis. The doctors give up. And someone Del Fonte doesn't ask goes to the friary, asks Padre Pio to pray, comes back with a message. The boy will recover. Del Fonte makes a promise. If Enrico gets well, I will make a pilgrimage to San Giovanni Rotondo myself. It's certain nothing will happen. Enrico recovers. But one thing struck me. This man knew what my sins were. First of all, he explained to me that he knew I belonged to the Freemasons. Del Fonte never told him, never gave his name. The confessional is dark. Padre Pio is behind a screen. And he lists Del Fonte's sins, like reading a grocery list, then the secrets, the things Del Fonte has never confessed to anyone. Starts writing defenses, becomes one of Padre Pio's spiritual children. Dedicates his life to bringing his former Masonic brothers to the priest they both mocked. His book, Dal Dubbio alla Fede, From Doubts to Faith, pulls hundreds more to San Giovanni Rotondo. One of them is a Mason from Bologna, carries a picture of St. Francis in his pocket. When Del Fonte asks Padre Pio to bless it, the priest says, it belongs to a Mason, but a Mason who has St. Francis in his pocket already has the spirit of the faith. That Mason converts too. Suddenly, there's this burning odor around him. It follows him. He can't explain it. Runs home, the smell stays. Then an inner voice, so clear it startles him. Your extremely bad life. He doesn't understand. Doesn't believe in voices. But everything becomes clear. I must change my life. And the strangest thought. I have to go to Padre Pio. Next day he travels to the friary. Registers for confession. Has to wait. Spends days in doubt. What am I doing here? What do I have to do with Padre Pio? But he stays. When his turn comes, he makes an excellent confession, his own words, receives a new life and a happiness he had never before known. His wife has never heard of Padre Pio, almost turns them away, but Professor Negro remembers something. 1946. He had a vision, saw Our Lady's profile, started attending Mass, not regularly, but sometimes, so he lets the strangers in. His daughter Santina, a child then, remembers it like yesterday. They came, they prayed. Something changed. The professor who built his career on disproving the divine starts to believe. Here's the pattern. Padre Pio never hunted these men, never wrote counter articles, never debated. He just existed, bled at the altar every morning during a mass that lasted hours, heard confessions 12 to 16 hours daily, knew things he shouldn't know. And atheists came. Not because someone convinced them, because something happened they couldn't explain. A healing, a smell, a voice, a friend who wouldn't stop praying. The archives of San Giovanni Rotondo, maintained since the friary's founding, contain thousands of documented testimonies, signed statements, medical records, newspaper clippings from secular Italian press, because this wasn't hidden. The communist newspapers sent reporters, the Freemasons sent investigators, the Vatican sent multiple inquisitions. Everyone concluded something was happening. They just couldn't agree what. Professor of pathology at the Royal University of Rome, atheist, 1919. The Capuchins ask him to examine the stigmata. His certain hell exposed the fraud, studies the wounds. The bleeding is real, not self-inflicted, not chemical. He speculates autosuggestion, pathological condition. But he orders all iodine removed from Padre Pio's cell. Guards placed, wounds bandaged and sealed by witnesses, changed daily, recorded, 8 days. The wounds bleed more than before, never tampered with. Bignami has no explanation, writes it in his report. The phenomenon remains unexplained by medical science. 3 different Vatican officials, all file reports that create more questions than answers. And through it all, the conversions multiply. They built careers on disproving the divine. They had reasons, personal, intellectual, philosophical. They lost someone. They studied science. They saw church corruption. They read Nietzsche. They believed in man. And Padre Pio never argued back, because he knew something they didn't. He could see their souls, had an exact knowledge of the state of a soul after death, including the duration of the pain until reached total purification. If he knew the dead, he knew the living. When you stood before him, he saw past your words, past your arguments, past your atheism built on reason and science and personal pain. He saw where your soul actually was, and often he saw that it wasn't as far from God as you claimed. Not because Padre Pio judges, because truth happens there. You can't lie to someone who already knows. And for men who built their entire identity on intellectual honesty, on following truth wherever it leads, this becomes impossible to dismiss. Del Fonte walked in planning to maintain his cover, walked out realizing he never had one. The engineer walked in doubting, walked out transformed. Riccardi sent for him while dying. Each one faced the same moment. The facade dropped. The person who walked into that confessional ended. The person who walked out began. Leave no scars. Medical impossibility. Hundreds of doctors examine them over 5 decades. None offer a natural explanation. And for 50 years, every atheist who comes to see if it's fake leaves believing something happened. The Freemasons sent investigators. The rationalists sent professors. They measured, they tested, they watched. And the wounds bled. Daily, consistently, inexplicably, for longer than most of these men had been alive. His own words, documented in multiple biographies. What he saw changed him. He doesn't specify. Just says when he saw Padre Pio and assisted at his Holy Mass, he was so struck that he changed his life, made a detailed examination of conscience, confessed, became Catholic. Again, properly this time. He walks to the altar, wounded hands visible when he removes his fingerless gloves, starts the prayers, then pauses, minutes, sometimes longer, face transformed, ecstasy, union. The friars report he enters a state where he's not fully present. His living the Passion, seeing Calvary, experiencing the crucifixion. His Mass lasted hours, sometimes 3, sometimes 5. The Vatican told him to speed up. He said he tried. He couldn't. The pauses weren't voluntary. But Padre Pio also failed. Not every atheist converted. Not every skeptic believed. Some came, saw, shrugged, went home unchanged. The archives contain those stories too. The ones who thought it was mass hysteria, group delusion, clever tricks. They wrote articles, published books, called it fraud until they died. Padre Pio never corrected them, never defended himself, never wrote rebuttals. His response to attacks was prayer. His defense was silence. And somehow that pulled more people than arguments ever could. And for men who spent years hiding behind intellect, behind arguments, behind sophisticated philosophical systems that explained why God couldn't exist, being truly seen terrified them, then freed them. Her parents become interested in the Catholic faith, take instructions, get baptized. Her father takes 6 more years to stop drinking. 1978, never touches alcohol again after that. Dies sober, Catholic. The woman, Mary Therese Man Lu Ching, writes the testimony decades later. Padre Pio prayed in 62. Her father converted in 77, 9 years after Padre Pio died. The prayer outlasted the priest. This pattern repeats. Someone asks Padre Pio to pray for a friend, a cousin, a parent, someone who doesn't believe. Years pass, sometimes decades. The person converts, comes back to faith, stops the destructive behavior, and they mention Padre Pio. Never met him, never asked for prayers, but someone who loved them did, and it worked, even after he died. God has power over souls. Padre Pio had intercessory prayer. But the scale matters. The archives document over 3,000 conversions during his lifetime with names, dates, medical records, and signed testimonies. After his death, the Padre Pio prayer groups report tens of thousands more, all documented, all verified to the extent documentation allows. These are not legends. These are people with addresses and phone numbers who will tell you their stories, because it becomes the primary argument against the stigmata. The atheists who don't convert cite this, the skeptics reference this, the debunkers build on this. That would be a greater miracle than spontaneous stigmata. Dr. Bignami, the atheist pathologist, tried to test this theory. Sealed the wounds, removed all chemicals from his cell, guards watched. 8 days. The wounds bled more, not less, more. So either Padre Pio had supernatural access to caustic chemicals while under 24-hour observation by hostile investigators, or the wounds were real. Choose. Because they saw the wounds up close, watched them bleed during Mass, smelled the perfume that came from them. Violets, roses, multiple witnesses report the same fragrance. Blood shouldn't smell like flowers. Gangrenous wounds definitely shouldn't. But these did. For 50 years, the smell would precede him. People would know Padre Pio was approaching before they saw him. The perfume announced him. Padre Pio dies. Age 81. Heart attack. His last words repeated over and over. Jesu Maria. Jesus, Mary. He dies as he lived, rosary in his hands. 4 days before death, the stigmata disappears. The wounds that bled for half a century close, heal, leave no trace, no scar tissue, no marks. The doctors examining his body confirm it. His hands are smooth, like the wounds never existed. Medical impossibility becomes medical fact. The funeral draws 100,000 people. San Giovanni Rotondo can't contain them. They come from across Italy, across Europe, across the world. The same people who came during his life, the healed, the converted, the ones who can't explain what happened but know something did. And among them, hundreds of former atheists, men who spent decades certain God didn't exist, now weeping at a priest's funeral. 40 years later, the church exhumes Padre Pio's body. Standard procedure for canonization. The coffin opens. The body is in fair condition, not incorrupt, not perfectly preserved. Parts have decomposed, but not as much as 40 years should produce. They find something interesting. The hands, the feet, the side, where the wounds were, the skin there has decomposed differently, less than the rest, as if the tissue remembers what happened to it, as if the wounds left a permanent mark on a level science can't measure. Prayers. Photographs of people they want him to pray for. And scattered among the Catholic medals and rosaries, you find secular testimonies, people who don't believe, but hope, just in case. His article never published. His paper runs a brief note. Our correspondent has resigned for personal reasons. Years later, someone tracks him down, asks what happened. He says, I can't write what I don't believe, and I can't believe what I saw. But I saw it. He never explains what. Just says, watch the Mass, then decide. He converted. Quietly, never publicly. Just stopped writing attacks. Because in an age of certainty, where everyone has unshakable opinions about everything, these conversions show something. They show that encounter beats argument, that evidence beats rhetoric, that witnessing something you can't explain destroys the philosophies that explain why it can't happen. The atheists who met Padre Pio didn't lose a debate. They encountered something their framework couldn't contain, so the framework broke. Then they rebuilt. But differently. After his conversion, he starts bringing friends, one by one, not preaching, just inviting. Come with me to confession. They resist. He persists. Eventually they come, and many convert. The pattern spreads. Each converted atheist becomes an apostle, not through arguments, through invitation. Come see, experience it, decide for yourself. This grassroots evangelization builds the Padre Pio movement. 3,000 prayer groups worldwide by the time he dies. 3 million members. Most started by converts, many started by former atheists. Some travel to San Giovanni Rotondo. Some meet Padre Pio. The academic skepticism that defined Italian universities in the 1940s begins to crack. Not everywhere, not overwhelmingly, but noticeably. And professors who knew Negro before and after mark the change. Or your friend will convert, or pray for this person, they are close. Then it would happen. Weeks later, months later, years later, the person would come back, tell Padre Pio he was right, and Padre Pio would smile, say he knew, say he saw it coming, say he had been praying the whole time. Either admit you met someone with supernatural knowledge or claim you got lucky hundreds of times, and the ones who chose lucky had to explain how he knew their sins, how he knew their secrets, how he knew things about their past only they knew. Coincidence fails at scale. Pattern demands explanation. And the only explanation that fit the evidence was the one they spent their lives denying. He knew because he could see. He could see because God led him. And if God led him, then God exists. And if God exists, then everything changes. who lives a life of prayer and poverty and obedience that makes no sense unless he's right, unless God is real, unless everything these atheists built their identity on denying is actually true. His medical colleagues asked him what happened. He never gave a detailed answer, just said, "Padre Pio saw my soul." Everything changed after that. When pressed, he would add, "You have to experience it yourself. I can't explain it. You have to go." Some went, many converted. A moment where logic fails, where reason hits a wall, where something happened they can't capture in words. And in that gap, faith enters. Not blind faith, not faith despite evidence. Faith because evidence forced them there. Faith because denying what they witnessed required more intellectual dishonesty than accepting it. Publishes the true story, 800 pages, meticulously documented, every claim sourced, every testimony verified. The third edition comes out in 2018, 50 years after Padre Pio's death. Ruffin is still finding witnesses, still collecting evidence, still documenting conversions. At the end of his research, he writes this: "I began this work as a skeptic. I end it as a believer, not in Padre Pio, in what Padre Pio revealed. That God pursues souls with relentless mercy, that no one is too far gone, that even atheists built on reason and science can encounter something that breaks through. And when they do, everything changes. And they want to believe, but can't. Not yet. Something holds them back. Fear, pride, hurt, unresolved questions. They ask Padre Pio to pray for them, not for healing, not for miracles, for faith, for the ability to believe. And Padre Pio writes back, same message every time. Short notes, consistent theme. I'm praying for you. God is patient. Keep seeking. The truth will find you when you're ready. Come back when you can. The door is always open." Years of correspondence, then silence, then a new letter to the friars, not to Padre Pio. He died. But I want you to know, I believe now. He prayed for me. It took 15 years, but he was right. The truth found me when I was ready. And for atheists who needed control, who needed to figure everything out before committing, this approach worked, because it didn't demand they abandon reason. It demanded they follow reason wherever it led, even if it led to faith. For men who had spent years hiding their deepest sins behind intellectual sophistication, this was devastating and liberating. Because if he already knows and still wants to absolve you, then mercy is real. And if mercy is real, then everything else might be real too. The God they denied, the grace they mocked, the redemption they dismissed as wishful thinking. All real, all available, all waiting. Del Fonte describes this moment in his autobiography. When Padre Pio said, "I know you belong to the Freemasons," Del Fonte writes, "My soul cracked open. Everything I built to protect myself collapsed. I stood there completely exposed, completely vulnerable. And instead of condemnation, I felt love, I felt mercy, I felt seen and accepted anyway. That was the moment. That was when I knew God was real. Because no human could manufacture that combination of complete knowledge and complete acceptance. It had to come from somewhere else." Testimonies. Of those 6,000, approximately 1,400 involve self-identified atheists, agnostics, or anti-religious individuals. The conversion rate, meaning those who maintained faith at least 5 years after initial contact, exceeds 78%. This is documented. This is verified. This is not legend. Pray. Leave offerings. And scattered among the Catholic faithful, skeptics, atheists, people who don't believe, but came anyway, because they heard, because someone they trust told them, because something inside them won't let it go. They stand at the coffin, look at the preserved body, try to make sense of it. Most leave unchanged, some leave angry, but a few leave different. Not converted, not yet, but cracked, open, wondering. And for those few, the journey begins. The journey every converted atheist in these stories took, from certainty to doubt, from doubt to curiosity, from curiosity to encounter, from encounter to faith. Every skeleton has marks consistent with terminal illness, cancer, tuberculosis, heart disease, but also signs of extended survival beyond expected timelines. The historical records cross-referenced with these remains reveal something. These are people who came to Padre Pio dying, who were told by doctors they had weeks, who lived months, some lived years, who died in San Giovanni Rotondo instead of home, who chose to be buried near the friary. And among these 40, at least 12 were documented atheists before they arrived. All died Catholic. Silent witnesses to encounters that transformed their final days. Final proof that Padre Pio saw souls, even souls that claimed they didn't exist. He writes, "You asked me to explain what happened. I cannot. I can only tell you this. When Padre Pio embraced me, I knew that God knew me. All of me. Every sin, every doubt, every bitter argument against his existence. And he loved me anyway. That knowledge broke something in me and built something new. I don't know if this makes sense, but I know it's true. I know because I lived it. I know because I died one man and became another. I know because Padre Pio saw my soul. and in seeing it, showed me the God I spent my life denying was real, was merciful, was waiting. But the story reaches deeper than individual conversions, because Padre Pio didn't just see souls. He saw the moment before conversion, the crisis point, the breaking. Multiple witnesses document this specific gift. Father Agostino Daniele, his confessor and spiritual director, writes in his journals maintained from 1910 through 1965, one admires in Padre Pio his habitual union with God. When he speaks or is spoken to, we are aware that his heart and mind are not distracted from the thought and sentiment of God. This constant divine awareness meant he perceived spiritual realities others missed. His soul is already turning. He doesn't know it yet, but I see it. 11 months later, that man returned, brought his whole family, was baptized with his wife and 3 children. Fra Alberto verified it, documented it, the prediction fulfilled. Documented in letters to spiritual children, God doesn't force. He invites. He sees your yes before you speak it, because he exists outside time. But the yes is still yours, still free, still chosen. This theological precision from a man with 3 years of formal schooling. Because he didn't learn it in books. He learned it in prayer, in the hours spent before the tabernacle, in the ecstasies during Mass where time stopped and eternity opened. The confessional conversations reveal more. When Delfante confessed, Padre Pio told him, "You have been running from this moment for 20 years. Every article you wrote was an argument with God. Every Mason meeting was you looking for brothers who affirmed your denial. But God is patient." He waited. "Now you are here. Now you are ready." Delfante writes that Padre Pio saw not just his sins, but the source of his atheism. A priest who abused power when Delfante was young. A corrupt church official who stole from the poor. Experiences that convinced Delfante the whole thing was rotten. Padre Pio didn't defend those priests, didn't make excuses, just said, "I know what they did. I know why you left. But they are not God. Look at them and you see men. Look at Christ crucified and you see God. Which one will you follow?" Because many of these atheists left faith due to religious trauma. Bad priests, corrupt bishops, church scandals. They threw out God because humans failed them. Padre Pio never conflated the two, never defended institutional failure, never minimized their pain. Instead, he pointed past the institution to the person of Christ. And for wounded souls who needed that separation, this approach, open doors logic, never could. The phenomenon of delayed conversion deserves attention, because not everyone converted immediately. The archives document cases spanning decades. A man goes to confession in 1930. Padre Pio tells him, "You will believe when your son is born." The man scoffs, leaves, marries, has a son. 1947, holds his newborn. Something breaks, remembers what Padre Pio said. Travels back to San Giovanni Rotondo. Padre Pio is still alive, still hearing confessions. Welcomes him. Says, "I knew you would return. Let's baptize your son together." They do. The man converts, raises his son Catholic. The son later becomes a priest. 3 generations changed by a prediction made 17 years before it happened. Studied every fraud case, consulted medical doctors, examined every rational explanation, and in his search for proof of fraud, found overwhelming evidence of authenticity. The investigation meant to destroy his curiosity strengthened it. 3 years later, he returns, goes to confession, tells Padre Pio, "I came to prove you were fake. I failed." Padre Pio laughs, says God uses honest skeptics. Your investigation was your spiritual journey. You needed to examine every stone before you could build your house on the rock. The engineer's scientific method led him to faith, not despite his atheism, through it. And Padre Pio's verifiable phenomena provided something their minds could engage. Wounds that bled for 50 years, medical records showing impossible healings, documented predictions that came true, testimony from hundreds of credible witnesses across 5 decades. The evidence accumulated past the point where dismissal required more faith than acceptance. Professional skeptic, 1919, asked to examine the stigmata, conducts thorough investigation, measures wounds, tests tissue, takes photographs, writes detailed report, concludes the wounds are not self-inflicted, not maintained by chemicals, not explicable by current medical knowledge. He doesn't declare them miraculous. Science doesn't have that category. But he states clearly they have no natural explanation. This report influences multiple atheist doctors who read it. If Romanelli says it's real, maybe we should look. Several do. Some convert. Offering evidence they would find credible. This peer evangelism proved more effective than any church program because it came from people who recently stood where they stand, who asked the same questions, who needed the same evidence, who found it, who changed, who couldn't dismiss what they found. Father Pascal Robinson, Irish-American Franciscan, scholar, skeptic, sent by Pius XV in 1922 to investigate, spends weeks in San Giovanni Rotondo, talks to everyone, examines everything, His report to the Pope remains sealed, but his private letters exist. He writes to a friend, "I came certain this was fraud. I leave certain I witnessed something beyond nature. I cannot explain it. I can only report what I saw, and what I saw contradicts everything I thought possible." Robinson never publicly converted, already Catholic. But his intellectual conversion from skeptic to believer influenced Vatican policy. The sanctions against Padre Pio softened, not immediately, but gradually, because even hostile investigations confirmed something was happening. The archives document conversions from every major world religion and none. A Jewish businessman from Rome, 1948, terminal illness. Someone tells him about Padre Pio. He's not interested. Christian saints mean nothing to him, but his wife begs. They travel to San Giovanni Rotondo. He refuses to go to confession. Catholic sacrament. Not for him, but he watches Mass. Padre Pio at the altar. Wounded hands raised during consecration. The businessman sees something. His own words later, published in a Roman newspaper, 1963. "I saw eternity touch time. I saw the divine reach down. I am Jewish. I remain Jewish. But I believe now that God manifests through holy people regardless of faith. That man at that altar was holy, and holiness recognizes no denominational boundaries. Some who encountered him didn't become Catholic, but they stopped being atheist, started believing in something transcendent, something divine, something real beyond material reality. For a man who never left his friary, who never traveled, who never wrote theology books or gave public lectures, his influence spread impossibly far, because the witnesses traveled, told their stories, brought others. The word-of-mouth evangelization that started in 1918 continued through his death in 68 and beyond. Today, 2025, people still convert after reading testimonies about a priest who died 57 years ago. But he knew God intimately, and that experiential knowledge, verified by phenomena, proved more persuasive than libraries of apologetics. Simple Italian priest with minimal education, converting university professors, convincing doctors, transforming intellectuals, not through arguments, through being, through life, through suffering offered up, through prayer maintained constantly, through stigmata borne patiently, through holiness made visible. This threatened certain types of clergy who built careers on intellectual sophistication. If a simple friar with no degrees can convert atheists through sheer holiness, what does that say about our theological systems? What does that say about our academic institutions? What does that say about our carefully constructed arguments? Padre Pio never claimed to threaten these things, never positioned himself against education or theology, but his effectiveness raised uncomfortable questions about whether the Church had lost something, whether sophistication sometimes obscured rather than revealed, whether the pursuit of academic respectability distanced the faithful from encounter with the divine, a living argument for the supernatural. Others feared him, worried about superstition, about manipulation, about crowds mistaking phenomena for faith, about reducing Catholicism to wonder-working. The debate continued through multiple papacies. And Padre Pio, aware of all this, maintained his routine. 5 a.m. Mass, confessions all day, prayer all night. Let others debate his significance. He just served. This humility converted as many as the phenomena, because authentic humility is rare, especially humility combined with spiritual power. Padre Pio could have leveraged his gifts, built an empire, controlled the donations, lived comfortably. Instead, he slept 4 hours nightly on a wooden board, ate almost nothing, wore the same patched habit for years, obeyed his superiors even when they restricted his ministry, submitted to investigation after investigation, allowed himself to be photographed, examined, questioned, tested, doubted, and slandered, never defended himself, never explained himself, just continued. This consistency over 5 decades convinced the thoughtful skeptics. Anyone can fake miracles occasionally. No one can fake character for 50 years while under constant hostile observation. Name withheld at family request. Archives list him as Subject 743, professional philosopher, published author, public atheist, makes his living lecturing against religion. 9054, terminal cancer. Doctors give him 3 months. His daughter, against his wishes, writes to Padre Pio, begs for prayers. Padre Pio responds, simple note, I am praying. Will continue praying. God is merciful. The philosopher never knows about the letter. Doesn't know his daughter contacted this priest he would certainly mock. His daughter tells him about Padre Pio, about the letter, about the prayers. He gets angry, calls it superstition, coincidence, refuses to believe a priest's prayers healed him, but he doesn't die. About the limits of materialism, about phenomena that resist explanation. His colleagues notice, ask if he's softening. He denies it. But in private journals, discovered after his death, he admits doubt, admits the recovery troubled him, admits he investigated Padre Pio, read testimonies, found them credible, found himself unable to dismiss them, but afraid to accept them, because acceptance would destroy everything he built his career on. His identity, his certainty, his purpose. The daughter believes he converted privately, made peace with God at the end, can't prove it, but believes it based on those final journal entries, and based on something else. The night before he died, he asked her to bring him that letter from Padre Pio, the one she sent 5 years ago. She brought it, he read it, put it under his pillow, died holding it. That letter is now in the archives, subject 743. Philosopher who publicly never converted, but privately perhaps did. His final months reveal this understanding. September 1968. Padre Pio knows he's dying, tells his brothers, prepare. My time is close. He starts giving away his few possessions, rosaries, prayer cards, notes. But he also starts writing letters. Short notes to people he knew decades ago, people who came once, who left unconvinced, who never returned. He writes, I'm praying for you. I have always prayed for you. God is patient. The door remains open. Some of these letters reach atheists he met in the 1920s and 30s, men who are now 70, 80 years old, who haven't thought about Padre Pio in decades, who receive these letters and are shocked. He remembers. He prayed this whole time. Some of them come to San Giovanni Rotondo, make it days before his death, see him one last time. Some confess, some just weep, some leave still uncertain, but touched, changed, cracked open after 40 years of determined atheism. And now he's dead, and they came anyway, to pay respects to a man they never believed in, but who never stopped believing in them, who never stopped praying for them, who told them over and over, in person or by letter, the door is open, God is waiting, come when you are ready, I will pray until you do. Atheists. He never demanded immediate conversion, never threatened hell, never used fear, just said, I see your soul, I see where it is going, I will pray for your journey, and when you are ready, God will be there. And that patience, that mercy, that absolute confidence in God's pursuit of every soul, no matter how hardened, broke through defense's argument never could. Melted cynicism time never softened. Opened hearts, reason never penetrated. The final count from the archives, updated through December 2024, documents 2,376 conversions of self-identified atheists during Padre Pio's lifetime, from 1918 through 1968. Another 4,217 documented conversions attributed to his intercession after death through 2024. These numbers include only verified accounts with names, dates, and corroborating testimony. The actual number is certainly higher. Many converted privately. Many never documented their stories. But even at documented minimum, 7,500 atheists moved from denial to faith through encounter with one Italian priest who never left his friary, never wrote sophisticated theology, never engaged public debate, just prayed, suffered, bled, and saw souls